In this tutorial, you'll be solving equations with fractions as coefficients by using a calculator. By the end of the tutorial, you should be able to say that you can solve one-step equations with coefficients that are fractions or mixed numbers. In order to be successful, you need to be able to do these three things: identify the variable, determine the inverse operation, and use a property of equality to isolate that given variable. Typically, we use one of these three calculators in the classroom. I'll be using the Center calculator, which is an internet-based calculator, desmos.com/scientific, to solve our problems in this tutorial. Take a look at these problems that have been provided for you in your notes. Pause the video now to peruse these examples. Okay, let's get started. Typically, when we solve an equation with integers, when we find our variable, if it has a coefficient, or a number that's secretly multiplying it, we know the inverse is division. But when we have a problem with a fraction coefficient, if we were to use that same procedure, we would get a very complex looking number. Now, although a calculator can compute this, this doesn't truly show your understanding of division of fractions. When you divide fractions, you technically multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal is when you flip the numerator and denominator. So let's go back to our easy example here. Instead of dividing by 3, if I multiplied both sides by the reciprocal, which is 1 over 3, would I get the same answer? Well, 1 times 3 is 3, 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 over 3 is 1. Typically, when our coefficient is 1, we leave it invisible. 12 times 1 is 12, 12 over 3 is 4. So we did get the same answer. So for our work today, we're not going to be dividing by fractions. That doesn't show our understanding. When you divide by a fraction, you're really multiplying by the reciprocal. We're also going to use our calculator for speed and efficiency today. 5 6 times 4 over 1. So I'm going to use the desmos.com scientific calculator. The fraction button over here on the far right has an A over B. So I'm going to type 5 6. Then I'm going to arrow out of the fraction and press the times key and enter a new fraction, 4 over 1. Now, as you can see, I get a really long value here, right? This is a repeating decimal value. But if your equation is given to you in fraction form, your answer should be given in fraction form. We're not converting from one type of number to another. So in the Desmos calculator, over here on the right inside this circle is an empty fraction. And when I hover my mouse over it, it says convert to fraction. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to click it once, and it will change my repeating decimal back into fraction form. So 10/3 is the response we're looking for. Let's try a few more. 1/2 x equals 3/2. So the inverse of multiplying by a half would be dividing by a half, but since we don't divide by fractions, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Now this one is fairly simple, so I'm going to do this one just mentally. 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 1 is 2, and this turns out to be a whole number. Five 7 x equals 3/14. Again, if you need to divide, but your coefficient is a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal. This time I'll use my calculator. 3/14 times 7/5. Oops. So if I get a decimal answer, click this circle button here, convert back to fraction. 3/10. Let's try one more. In this problem, the variable is inside the fraction. When that happens, simply rewrite the fraction with the variable off to the side. The reason we do this is so that when you take the reciprocal, you don't accidentally write the x in your value, because that is entirely wrong. We don't want to write any variables in our reciprocal here or in our multiplicative inverse because we're not trying to cancel out the x. We want to leave the x alone. We just want to get rid of the 2/5. So we flip it over and multiply by 5/2. Again, on your calculator, type 5/2 times 1/3. If you get a decimal answer, convert it back to fraction form. 5/6. Alright, let's take a look at a problem that has a mixed number as a coefficient. Unfortunately, you cannot do any multiplying or dividing by a mixed number. You can only have proper fractions or improper fractions, but no mixed numbers. So what we need to do here is rename this value. We do that by multiplying the denominator by the unit and then adding the numerator. So 3 times 2 is 6, 6 plus 1 is 7. We'll do the same with the solution. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. And now we're ready to multiply by the reciprocal. Now find the side that has the variable, and that's the fraction you're going to flip. (14/28), if I did that in my head. And if you're not sure if that's in reduced form, put it in your calculator and check. So here in the Desmos calculator, I'm simply going to type my answer, which is 14/28. Now, if I wasn't sure, if I press this fraction button, it will give it to me in reduced form. So 1/2 is the simplest answer. Although this is correct, this is the best answer. One last problem. 2 2/5 equals 4 1/2 x. Again, no mixed numbers as a coefficient. Convert these to improper fractions by multiplying the denominator times the unit and adding the numerator. Now remember, find your variable, and that's the fraction you're going to flip. So multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient, not the reciprocal of the answer. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2/9. These reduce to an invisible 1, and now I'm going to use my calculator. 2/9 times 12/5. If I get a decimal, convert it back to fraction form. 8/15. And it's as simple as that. Now get your calculator ready and give these two a try. Pause the video now. Okay, are you ready to check your answers? How did you do? Hopefully you did great. And that concludes the tutorial on solving one-step equations with fractions as coefficients.